And one of our other trustees, Sherry Jordan, just started working at the Fed as well.
She did?
Yeah.
Do you remember which department?
She'll be showing up at 4, so you can ask her yourself then.
Oh, okay. No, you know.
She couldn't get away from meetings until then.
I can believe it.
Okay, folks, we are live on YouTube now. It is working.
Nobody, I'm not, this is a board meeting rather than a committee. I'm not ex officio.
I understand. I'm talking about committee.
Okay, all right.
Okay, are we ready?
Believe so.
All right. I'd like to call to order the January 26th meeting of the Virginia Museum of Natural History's Board of Trustees. Welcome, everybody. Welcome our guest, Dr. Foley from the Foundation. How are you? We do not have a quorum yet. So there are a couple of items I was going to go over at the beginning of the meeting that I'm going to hold to the end of the meeting when we think we may have a quorum. One is the first action item, which was approval of the minutes, which we vote on. So we're going to hold that to the end of the meeting. Please help me remember to circle back to the minutes. Also, we were going to go over and vote on a resolution commending the service of Gene Smith. I think everyone should know by now that Gene, who's a very valuable contributor to the museum, passed away. So please help me remember to go over that resolution and go over the minutes as we get further into the meeting, and we hopefully have a quorum. I'm putting them right here so that I don't forget about them. Okay, so I have several items that I think are incredibly exciting and noteworthy that I'd like to mention in my chairman's report, although they are all also in your meeting minutes, but I think they're worth calling out. And Coast folks did not notice, the museum had a really good meeting from Virginia Senate staff from the State Appropriations Committee. In December, that went well. I understand they stayed for hours. And so while we may not have gotten the money that we necessarily wanted for the Waynesboro Museum, I think having that relationship started, having them come to the museum is noteworthy. So thank you to the museum and staff who pulled that together. As far as resolution of issues, Art, you brought up a Wi-Fi issue at the last meeting, and I have a tickler list of issues, and I just wanted to let you know there's been progress made on the Wi-Fi situation. And would you like to give a little bit of an update on the Wi-Fi situation?
Sure. So we had a good meeting with the city of Martinsville, who provides the MyNet network, a fiber optic connection. So we went over the hardware, the software, the setup, and the short story is everything we have is obsolete, and they are going to replace everything free of charge. We pay a monthly fee per router, which we pay anyway. So I've followed up with the city just yesterday. They're going to have everything done in the next month or so, so well before the next May board meeting. With that, we'll get a faster connection for the public, which is non-password protected. We're also going to add at least one password protected login for staff use, for visiting researchers, for CHML. But what we'll do for CHML is in fact probably add another login separate from everybody. So I think that's checks off a lot of boxes, hardware, software connection.
Awesome.
So,
That's great news.
and that is separate from the Vita network, which of course we are hardwired into, that we use for official state work.
That's really exciting. It was my impression that up to this point, everybody just sort of accepted we've got lousy connection and that's just the way it is. And
When Art speaks, we
this
take
is a great
action.
lesson that squeaking wheels can make things happen. So thank you.
There's something to be said for someone like myself going into a meeting like that who doesn't know, and I freely admit I don't know. So I rely on the experts to explain it, and then they are freely willing to help offer
Fantastic.
solutions. So.
Because that'll make working in the collection so much
Yep.
easier. I mean, I'm thinking selfishly for me, but I know the curators, you know,
They were not happy.
yeah, it makes it so much easier to be able to tap into the internet wherever they are in the collection. So that's great news.
All right, a couple of other things that I think are noteworthy. Drum roll, please. We finally are back to work on getting a contractor for the Gene S. Adams Education Pavilion. For those of us that have worked on that for a while, there's been ups and downs, and I think there's real progress there. And assuming that we have bidders that bid on the contract, there would be a meeting with contractors, I think in February is what I understand. So
Correct.
huge progress there. And then the last item I'll mention is I think those of you were at the last meeting, we went into closed session to discuss a personnel matter. That personnel matter, we can now report has been resolved, which is exciting. And the foundation is putting in their budget $7,500 for additional staff development. So the foundation has to vote on that, but I understand it's been favorably recommended by the executive committee to the foundation. So hopefully we will get that $7,500 that we had asked for staff development, for museum staff development. So very exciting that is moving forward. All right. So regular things on the agenda besides those very exciting things is, I think you guys know, I have a chairman's privilege of adding stuff to the agenda, and I suggested we have a staff introduce themselves at every meeting. So we have Lynn, hopefully on Zoom. Are you there, Lynn?
I'm turning my computer around for her right now.
Okay, so we have Lynn. I'm not going to say your last name, Lynn. You can introduce yourself and say your last name. Who's going to talk a little bit about what you do at the museum, which we're very thankful for. There you go.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Lynn Elmahmood, and I'm a security officer and do sort of several tasks here at the museum. I started off here about 8 years ago, part-time, and I've been full-time for the last 5. And I also schedule weddings or events here at the museum. I do various other tasks outside of security. I help handle the fleet of vehicles, reserving the vehicles, maintaining them. The busiest thing is probably going to be rentals right now, though, for me. So people sometimes come in to see the museum to see if they'd like to decide to rent the museum, or they may, rent through email, but that's probably one of the busiest tasks that's kept me busy. And I also order supplies like janitorial supplies, help assist with other supplies and things that need ordered throughout the building. Trying to think what else. Various other things, but basically anywhere I'm needed, basically in the museum.
Good.
I kind of like to stay busy.
Lynn and the whole team are good troubleshooters. So when they identify there's an issue, they all jump in.
Exhibits.
Yeah, that's true. And also, like, I help assist with the setups for the rentals and takedown. And also I've assisted a little bit today with taking up of the old exhibit and temporary exhibits today. So
Good.
just kind of anywhere I'm needed, basically.
We appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. I found that there's room here to grow at the museum if you put in the work, and there's always room to grow here. So it's been a really nice place to work.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody have anything else? All right, thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay. And then in addition to meeting staff each meeting that we don't usually interact with, a deep dive on something. And Joe and I talked, and we thought it'd be very appropriate to have a deep dive on our General Assembly appropriation, given that part of the team met with General Assembly this morning. So, Joe, I don't know if you or someone else is okay.
Ryan's going to take that task.
All right.
All right, I am attempting to share screen.
Thank you.
All credit to Ian for showing me how to do it. All right, so this was gonna be Jonathan and I both presenting this, so it's me today. So what we're seeing here is the general fund appropriation for the museum over the past several years. So this is gonna be the appropriated funds, not the earned revenue. So what we did here is these are, the blue bars are the actual funds. And what I did for fiscal year 2008, so the blue is the actual, which is 3,369,000. What we did in the gray was take that for inflation. So basically, that amount in 2008 is in today's dollars is 4.6 million. So it was the largest appropriation in real dollars, but obviously it's even more if you take into account inflation. Obviously, fiscal year 2024 is real dollars as well. So what that means is basically we've adjusted how we operate over the years. So what you see in the trends here, starting really 2004, there was a strong push to hire more staff. So we increased staff leading up to the opening of the new building on Starling Avenue.
What was the year of the new building?
It opened in 2007. So it's the end of fiscal year 2007. So I was part of that group. I was hired in 2005. So sharp rise in number of staff hired. Obviously, with the recession in 2008, we saw a drop off. We lost some key areas, but we adjusted how we operate to focus on mission. So, for example, office. So that was in-house graphic design. It was newsletter. All these different things. So rather than lose key areas like research or education or things that we exist for, we just adjusted how we operate. So that includes outsourcing. So for graphic design, a lot of what we do now is outsourced, which ends up being pretty cost effective. It's a luxury to have a full in-house graphic design staff. We'd love to have it. We wouldn't complain about it, but there's definitely ways to operate outside that. Just a few key stats here. So we're currently at 34 full-time staff. With a handful more part-time, what is it, 10, 12, something like that.
Yeah.
So our highest point was in fiscal year 08, which is 47. Again, that was kind of the peak of the hiring with the new building. And one of the success stories we all feel like, I think, is with research. So it was pretty well decimated along with other areas during the recession. So there's been a real concentrated effort to build that back up. So not only with curators, but also with support staff. So we were down to about 9 full-time staff roughly a decade ago. We're up to 15 now, which is a great success story, we feel like. So with the 5 curators, we have a couple of researchers, and then of course several support staff that directly support the curators' work. That's kind of the highlights. It's basically, you see the trends. Obviously, we want to keep growing. But even though our appropriation is growing, it's still not at the level it was in 08. But we're accomplishing a lot within what we have, we feel like. And I think with the earned revenue, that's far more now than it was in 08. So I think we've learned to adjust and learn to create additional sources of revenue to accomplish mission.
I know we didn't ask you this, so I apologize for asking you this now. But do we know if other museums went through the same sort of reductions in appropriations over this time period? I can't imagine we were the only one whose appropriation was cut.
It was pretty, especially among state agencies, it was pretty widespread or across the board. I don't have the exact numbers.
Right.
But it was,
Right.
Yeah, and if you'll see the drop from, I'm just far enough away to,
17 to 18 maybe?
yeah, you got that little, there you go. Okay, so, 17 to 18, we have that drop there. That was an across the board, every state agency treated equally. But I will also point out, and I did point out to the board at the time, and I also pointed out to the board when I first started here, that when we went through budget cuts, as we are an agency of one small location, right, a 5% budget cut means a lot than as if you have like an agency that's got offices all over the Commonwealth. Even though it's more money, you're spreading that out amongst 10, 20, 50 locations. So it really hurt. In particular, that one drop there, that's where we were kind of up against the wall, that if we cut every bit of discretionary spending, which would have included throwing the copy machine out and, all kinds of crazy things. I did approach the board and hated to do it, but we did a force reduction at that point. And we've now built that back up. You don't like to do things that way. The silver lining is we built the staff back up from that 2017 time period. We were able to do so strategically for today's mission. And so that's part of why we're back up in research and collections. The other thing too has been approval of new positions through the General Assembly. That includes the new technician we hired and one of the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab positions as well. So kind of a sad history, but then you did what you had to do to regrow.
So I guess they don't just tie appropriations to like CPI or something, but it just doesn't.
No.
happen. Of course not.
No.
Right.
Although Ryan
That was a
is
silly question.
Ryan is correct. The staff have been encouraged and coached to maximize revenues. And so what we're seeing is that, we used to have a cafe, didn't really make a lot of money off of that. It was a nice luxury, but now what we do instead is we encourage our patrons to use the local restaurants, right? So that's good for the local economy anyway. So Robbie Hendricks now, who you met, I think it was last meeting, has refocused the mission of the store, and we've kind of maximized revenues there. And we do see correspondingly a dramatic increase in the amount of dollars spent per visitor. So it was tough, but there is sort of a silver lining, I suppose.
And I know it's very early, but do you feel good about the lobbying today?
Yes, I feel good about the condition of the Commonwealth. We would have heard rumblings by now if there is going to be a reduction. In fact, we know that what is budgeted currently is that as of July 1st, there'll be a 5% salary increase for state workers. That's part of the reason you see that bump there. That's also because of the approved CHML analyst. So I think we're doing okay. I mean, I'll tell you, when I started here in 2010. So you see that two to the right of the gray bar, right? So it was ugly. I mean, it was terrible. And our Vita bill was $266,000, right? That's where we were literally pulling computers out of the wall and calling Vita up to come get them, right? So, I mean, it was absolutely ugly. And so, I think we should have whatever that figure is. What did you say it was? 4.6?
4.658.
Yeah. So over 4.5 million, we should have that, I mean, for what we do. I mean, we really should. But just about all of our mission-based work is done through revenues, grants, foundation, and whatnot. Very, very little of the appropriation goes towards specific like mission-based projects. It goes to salary, it goes to maintaining the building. And that's the majority of it to this day.
Well, I'd just like to chime in. I've been associated with the museum since 2000. And I was here the day in 2000, I was here for the groundbreaking in Martinsville for the museum. I was also in the building when they announced the layoffs in 2008, when people were emptying their desks, and it was very grim. I lost my job in that, working at Natural Heritage, so I can certainly appreciate how it goes. And I will say that since Joe's tenure, and especially in the last few years, things are looking really good for the museum. I've been discouraged over the years with the state support for the museum, but the staff has been fantastic in making do with what little they have and excelling. And now I think that is being recognized more and more statewide, and it shows in the support for the museum. And as the chair of research and collections, I have to say that their lot has improved dramatically in the last 2 years. Having actual support, not only a full curatorial staff, but also support staff. That's something that has lacked in research and collections ever since 2008 and before. So kudos to all of you that make this work and will carry us forward.
I think our messaging in the General Assembly building, I mean, I've been doing it. I mean, the first time I went in there, I just basically got dropped off, right? And it was terrible. Speaking of ugly, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never done that before. Did the best I could, but I think, over time, me and the staff have figured things out, and the board is much more involved in that, and I think that carries a lot more weight. I hate to use vulgar language, but it's true. When I tell people about, politicians and people who make a difference, people who are making policy and budget decisions, stuff like that, they don't want to hear from a dumbass agency head, right? That's the way it is, But when citizens come to the forefront, they're gonna listen. And I think that's made all the difference in the world. You can put that in the minutes if you want.
All caps.
I'll
Bright
have
red.
it.
Anybody have any further questions or any further discussion on our appropriations from the General Assembly? Okay, well, I personally want to thank everybody that participated this morning. I think it's really important. I do think it makes a difference. I know it's not easy, especially for people that are maybe more introverted. But I do think it's incredibly important. So thank you so much to those of you who participated. It really makes a difference when you put a face to our mission. So.
And a number of board members also sent personal letters to
Yes.
their legislators. So that I appreciate that too.
I had to go look mine up since I'd moved, which actually was probably something I should have done before I moved, right?
And it may
But,
change again now with the redistricting.
Yes, they probably will, so. All right, that is it for the chair's report. The next item is the treasurer's report, which we typically vote on, so I think we'll hold that to the end of the meeting as well. So now we've got 3 items we're gonna come back to, which takes us to the executive director's report.
Okay, so obviously a lot of the details are going to come out of committee reports, but just kind of looking over what we've been up to, we're continuing to push towards our strategic plan. So we'll hear about the specifics on that, but as we are halfway through the fiscal year, as again you'll see in the finance report, we're doing just fine. And the revenues are going well, and I'll just kind of bring up that, and I don't want to be repetitive with the finance report, but you'll see again with attendance and so forth, we were basing numbers upon what we had seen in the past, but we see a general trend of growth. So what we saw, of course, in 21 was fiscal year 21 was pretty low attendance because of the pandemic. It started to come back in fiscal year 22 and in fiscal year 23, it continues to grow and it's growing at a linear rate. So I don't know what the trend's going to look like in 2 more years. If it's going to continue to grow, is it going to be logarithmic? Is it going to level off? But if it does grow at the current pace, in about 2 years, we should be back to pre-pandemic visitation levels. And so I just think that's a good thing. That's not a bad recovery period. The other thing I'll bring up, since we kind of were already mentioning research and collections, we did hire our new technician to support Dr. Kuhn, and so 50% of that position is going to be dedicated to herpetology, and 50% of that position will be dedicated to mammalogy. And the good thing there is that we have another technician, but she was split in time between the various invertebrate departments and mammalogy. So now she's going to be focusing more of her time in the invertebrate departments and so forth. So we're making those shifts to account for the growth over there. And
Those are shifts the staff is happy with.
they're driving them. They're the one driving them, yes. So, and on top of that, of course, Dr. Kuhn has been set up with an account in the foundation that she's using essentially as a startup to get her lab up and running. So we're very happy with that. I know some of you kind of heard my musings earlier, but we did have kind of a special thank you to our members. We had an event celebrating Pliny the Elder. You maybe remember me talking about him before. So this was the guy that coined the term natural history. So it was his birthday in 23. So we had his 2000th birthday, and we had a special wine tasting about the regions that he wrote about in his chapter on wines in his book, Naturalis Historia. And so it was really well received. And I think what we're seeing also, and Ryan will report more on this, but we're seeing more and more financial support, both generally for the museum, and we've also seen an increase in the people in the Waynesboro area are giving towards our program there. So I will just conclude by saying the trends with our projects and the trends with our funding and attendance are all headed in the right direction. We don't really talk a lot. It's really a foundation thing, but the foundation is closing in on its first $1 million in the endowment. Why that's important, and they've forgotten because nobody who's on the foundation when I first started here, when this new building opened in 2007, they've all rotated off. But the original goal was 4 million to supplement the building and 1 million for an endowment. And of course, that's when the recession hit and everyone had kind of forgotten about the million. So we've reminded them, and so they're doing what they can. We're looking at management, which has been going really well. We get reports from from Stifel on a regular basis and so forth. So once we get to that million, whether they like it or not, they're going to celebrate. So that's just the way it's going to be. So anyway, just kind of wanted to finish on that the trends of the museum here at the beginning of the new calendar year are going well.
Anybody have any questions for Joe? I do, but anybody besides me, anybody have any questions for Joe as part of the executive director's report?
I am going to turn things over to Ryan for the advancement report, but
Joe, go ahead and do that, and then we'll
Okay.
then I'll ask my question.
all right, Ryan, you want to cover advancement?
Sure. Just want to hit the highlights. You all have the advancement report in your packet. I just want to start off with we are very excited about the Museums for All program. So I know we've talked about it. It's the program for folks who are part of the SNAP benefits program, the EBT cards, to receive free admission as part of this IMLS-funded national program. So we're seeing increased percentage of overall visitors who are part of that audience, and we've gotten private support from Hooker Furnishings to underwrite that, and we're very happy to report that Hooker Furnishings is also really happy about it, and they're going to double their support for the coming year. So yeah, we're very excited. That's gonna be finalized this probably in the next few weeks. But with that, we're partnering also with Carter Bank and Trust. So everybody's playing together in the sandbox, and the officials from Hooker Furnishings are talking with Carter Bank and Trust. They're all happy about it. We've all got it worked out who's going to be listed first and who's referred to as what, but they're going to support it as well. So we're tripling the support we've had previously with these new partnerships. So very exciting. It's obviously good for us. It's what we want to do. We want to introduce ourselves and science in general to as many individuals as possible. Also, the companies, it's good for them. So it's part of their mission as well. As far as grants, we've gotten several in support of our science outreach initiatives. That's something we're doing over the next year. It's a combination of festivals, exhibits, need-based scholarships for Christie's programs as well. So Patterson Foundation has led that effort. We've also got a number of other partners in support of that as well. So that's going well. We've got new exhibits coming in. We've got our Dinosaur Discoveries exhibit opening in February. That's from the American Museum of Natural History. So that's going to open February 11th at the museum.
And Ryan was brilliant because we're going to double dip on it. We have the opening, so everyone's going to be excited about that, but then we have a dinosaur festival that's going to be centered around that exhibit in July.
Yes. So it makes Dino Festival planning a lot easier. Obviously, we'll have more for the festival, but it really helps with that. So we had over 4,600 visitors at the last Dinosaur Festival, so it's a very good possibility we'll exceed that. We hope we do, and we'll be ready for it. So. As far as festivals, we've got several coming up. They're all listed. Most of them are listed. We are already working on 2024 partnerships. So we're working on sponsorships, grants, all these things for 2023, but we're also working into 2024. So it really highlights the importance of planning ahead and long-term planning that we're already working on 2024 partnerships. Just want to highlight we have finalized the selection of our museum experiences manager. So that's our new what was previously the exhibits and publications manager. So she is going to start. Her first day is February 21st. So she and her family are coming from Florida, from the Tampa area. So it's another family coming to the area. She's very excited and really strong experience. As far as endowment, I just want to build on that. So we looked at the average annual growth rate of the foundation of the endowment since 2016. It's right at 30% a year. So it's 29.87% per year average annual growth rate. So that's a combination of new gifts and also strong growth. Without the new gifts, it's about 10% a year, which is good. I wish I could get 10% a year. So yeah, those are the really big highlights. Overall fundraising is strong. Museum revenue is up well over last year and close to pre-pandemic levels. So that's kind of where we're at.
And Bug Festival this weekend.
Bug Festival on Saturday.
Bug Festival is good because it's never it's not going to be 30 or 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. It's usually like between 500 and 1,000.
About 400.
Certainly not in January.
Pardon me?
Certainly not in January.
Yeah. So, what's special about it is that we really get to touch people. You know, they're when you have that crush, they're cycling through, and you're just frantically trying to keep up with the onrushing hordes of curious people. But with this, we can take our time with people. We can have discussions and so forth. So it's a much different atmosphere than the giant festivals we throw.
And Bug Festival is overwhelmingly the most positive reviewed festival among visitors. Staff love it too. I mean, like Joe said, you get a chance to talk to people. You're not rushed.
Which is another reason to consider a different time of year in the future, not January. Because having live insects, or at least the opportunity of having live insects, I think would really add to it, which has been done in the past.
Yes.
So it's just throwing it out there. Squeaky wheel and all that.
Or, name it Dr. Art Evans
No,
presents
no, no.
Bug Fest. That'll bring them in.
Well, was it Bug Fest? I think it was in July, just before the pandemic. I think in 2019, very well attended.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great to have live things. I mean, that just added an element. Most of the festivals that are organismal based, you don't get to have live dinosaurs. I mean, the feathery things outside in the parking lot, sure. But it's an opportunity to really bring in live organisms, which is an element that at a natural history museum you don't often get to do. Plus, you could highlight the living collections as well, which are substantially invertebrates.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we'll certainly take that into account as we schedule these things. The other thing we did that was participatory demonstrations outside, literally with bug nets and stuff, so kids could literally
The
catch
park
things.
across the street. I mean, it's everybody's got their thing. And I'm just saying that insects are active in spring and summer, so to me, that's a natural time to consider scheduling.
Okay.
Anybody have anything for either of these guys? Right, I have something. So in your report, Joe, you mentioned the excellent visit that we had to Douglas Avenue. And for those of you that went, I think it was very educational. If you haven't had a chance to go, I'd suggest going. So I talked with some folks after that, and at least I know a couple of us really feel like we need to be doing something with those mounts that are deteriorating in that room. Bring them back to the museum, sell them, fix them, do something with them. So I would like to suggest that we come up with a plan to, I know there's a de-accession, whatever the word is, if we're gonna get rid of them, if there's a formal process we need to go through. If we're gonna save them, we need to clean them up and save them. If we're gonna whatever them and sell them, let's do that. I know that you have some concerns, they might not be worth much, but I'm in the antique business and there are mounts in the antique shop where I am that sell for over $1,000 a piece. So I think there's some residual value for some of those that museum staff don't want. So I think we just need to do something rather than letting them sit there and continue to deteriorate. I don't know if other people have thoughts or feelings about that, but I walked away saying, oh my gosh, what a shame.
That
we
initially
both
falls on the curatorial staff, doesn't it, which already has plenty to do? I mean, I understand that it's something that's worthwhile, I agree with you. But in the grand scheme of things, if it falls on curators, that's problematic because that's gonna cut into their research programs. If there's a way of moving things ahead and not having them bear the brunt of it, at least after an initial assessment, that would be an ideal situation, I think.
Yeah, I don't know who would fall in, or I hear what you're saying. I just see $50,000, $100,000 just going to waste. I mean, money we could use for stuff, new equipment for the curators. I just see money sitting there rotting.
So I have asked that the staff do basically an assessment. So what do we have? What's wrong with it? and what steps need to be taken. And if possible, we're going to try to put a budget number on that. In other words, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we have the capacity to do a large-scale conservation effort without sacrificing something else. So with that, however, there are professionals that we can contract that would do that. But I want to look at what we estimate the hours would be and what the eventual value would be. Just so you understand what the history of these things are, these were exhibit pieces at the old building, the Douglas Avenue facility. They never made it over to Starling Avenue. What happens in certain situations, think of the Douglas Avenue building. It's not really it's not built to be a museum. It's an old school building that's been refurbished, and they did well. If you look at the old pictures, I mean, it looks just like a museum should. However, a lot of these mounts, they're old to start with, and they were negatively impacted by natural light. So I would not ever want to. They do not meet VMNH standard for exhibits. They just wouldn't. So I would not want to put them out. I don't have any issue whatsoever looking into what we can do with them. The deaccession process is mechanical. You know, we make a presentation and give you a full inventory, including images and so forth. Once it's deaccessioned, we can dispose of it as we see fit. I just also want to make sure, and I'm going to get the advice of the curators, I just don't want this in any way to be misperceived from the outside as us reducing our collections or deaccessioning collections and selling them in such a way that we need to do this to pay the bills or something like that. You know, it's we just have to proceed carefully and transparently is all I'm saying.
Yeah,
Are
I
there
think the
things that-
public would care if they're rotting too, though. I mean, I think it's just as bad a message to know that
Oh,
you
yeah.
have collections that are rotting.
Right.
What about their value in terms of maybe being part of things that can be loaned to smaller institutions that have affiliations with us in the state, or a small traveling exhibit? Or I assume that you've got all the educational bits and pieces you need, or there are things over there you covet and just haven't had an opportunity to
Haul the
grab?
Jaguar with us
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah, I mean, are there things there that are of interest to you, or you've already had your go at it?
A lot of them are the larger mounts, correct? So if they were on site, it could possibly be, but typically it's the smaller things that we're using.
And are there things there that you think would be of value? I mean, is that, rather than look at it purely from a research point of view, and if not deaccession it, do you see it as a value to education, or?
I would honestly have to look at them again.
Okay.
I was over there with the group, but I would really need to look at them again.
Yeah, that
Kind
could
of
be part of,
assess.
that could be part of the
assess.
plan, loaning them, using them for education, selling them, whatever, just,
Which still has
Let's
to be
do something.
managed. And if you've got a staff that's already doing 5 jobs, you know,
I get
at
it.
once, it can be a challenge.
Yep.
But it
All
needs
right,
to be
well,
done.
I hope by before the May board meeting, we'll have kind of a look at this assessment, and
Okay, good.
that'll paint the roadmap going forward.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
anything else? All right, the next item on the agenda is the Research and Collections Committee report. Art.
Well, it's gonna be brief, because we took a poll to see if we'd have a quorum to do anything at this meeting, and we did not. So we didn't hold a meeting, and I do hope that there'll be a discussion for scheduling board meetings next year, that we seriously consider not tying in a board meeting with the legislative push. And I'm speaking only for myself. The Research and Collections Committee has a lot of things that we do, and being able to meet during regular quarterly board meetings when we can count on a quorum really helps us move business along. And for the last several years, the first quarter meeting just is sort of a dud because people aren't able to participate for one reason or another. That said, the only new thing that I have to mention is that there's a push for the accreditation for the museum. We're reviewing the museum's collection policy that was last revised in 2013. And there is version that's floating around where some of us have commented on it, but it hasn't gotten a lot of participation. It would be great if all of the members of the Research and Collections Committee and other interested board members as well really take a look at this document. If for no other reason, it will help familiarize you with what we say we're doing. And this document is important in terms of accreditation for the museum. So it's something that needs to be done toward that effort. So that's out there. And so there's two versions, the original and the red line version, which has the suggestions, the comments, and so on. And I know that Dr. Moncrief is trying to get a final version. She was hoping to have it in front of the committee this month so we could make a decision and then pass it on to the full board, but we can't do that. So it's going to have to wait until May. The other document that we're working on, which is brand new, is the live animal policy. I've worked in an insect zoo in a natural history museum. I also had, for many years, close ties with the American Zoo and Aquarium Association with regards to insect zoos. And so there are policies that they put into place with live animals, how they're kept either for research or educational purposes. And the museum does have a living collection. What a living collection may look like at the new Waynesboro facility remains to be seen, but it's very likely that this living collection could expand. And so this is a document that will help guide the staff in charge of these animals move forward and gives them contingencies if animals get sick or die or injured or that sort of thing. And we are living in an age where invertebrates are pretty darn close to being treated as vertebrates. And so we really have to get a good solid policy in place that is thoughtfully rendered so we can move on it and build on it as we move along. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks for doing that, because the collections are the foundation of the museum, and the collections reports in the AAM reaccreditation package are going to be the foundation of that presentation.
Well, just for example, the Cincinnati Zoo has one of the premier insect zoos in the country. In fact, one of the oldest insect zoos in the country. And I have dear friends and colleagues that work there, and they've offered to assist the Natural History Museum with providing documentation on animal care sheets and things, and they have to follow AZA policies as well. So, you know, we're coming from a really good place in terms of formulating our policy here.
Art, as a member of the committee, I would second that if people have an opportunity to see that animal use policy and the collections policy, it would be really valuable.
Guilty as charged.
I know I gave some feedback to Nancy, and certainly it should be a living policy. So when we do, or if we do open that Waynesboro campus, we will have to revisit it because there's some specific facilities mentioned and a specific veterinarian, for example, that's mentioned. So we need to.
I have a workaround for that.
Okay.
And I think that the primary focus of the document is going to be the Natural History Museum and its affiliates.
Yeah.
And Waynesboro would do that. And if other museums care to join us, or there's other members of the family or additional facilities, it'll easily grow into that. I agree that it's not to ignore something, it's just to recognize that Martinsville is the Natural History Museum and that we have fingers in a lot of pies, and those pies are part of the family.
Yeah. And I would also say I'd be willing to meet as a committee outside of the board meeting schedule too, if that makes it easier on Nancy to move this forward, because I do think it's important.
So far, I'm the one that's a problem.
Okay.
Because I carve out my time at the beginning of the year to coincide with the board meetings, and I get thrown off if I screw up, which I did in August with the dates, and this time of year, which people just aren't able to participate. So.
Right. Well, I just throw it out there as another alternative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be shy. We'll have some.
Likewise.
Okay.
I know it's a little out of order, Joe, but Art, are you finished? Because I want to talk about something that might help with scheduling. Anybody have any questions or for Art? So there is a new policy about being able to hold virtual meetings and committee meetings, and that might help with some of your concerns about timing. So we were going to talk about it under announcements. Would you like to talk about it now instead, Joe?
That's fine. So we did write and update an electronic meetings policy. However, we have subsequently learned, and I don't know how people are supposed to learn about this. We stumbled on it by, frankly said, by accident. But there are two policies that have changed that are going to help us out a lot, will help you out a lot as board members. The first is, excuse me, and I have to update this policy with this new information. I have to share it with Deb to get any input. So hopefully
We have
that's
to then vote on it.
uh,
A change in a policy to adopt the state's new policy.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I
good.
think I just want to make sure
Good.
it's spelled out
Good.
as an internal working policy. So the two things that are pertinent in the new policies are that, one, you can have a 100% electronic meeting, but that's like literal. In other words, you can't have 5 people in this room and then beam 10 other people in. It has to be 100% across the board, so staff, board members, and so forth. So if you have a 100% board meeting, that's fine, but you have to keep minutes, you have to broadcast it just like any other meeting. However, you can't do them sequentially. So for example, if next board meeting in May, we did it 100% virtually, the August meeting would have to be in person by definition. And so, so that gives some flexibility. The same thing goes with the committees. They can meet electronically 100%, just not sequentially. So that's something that you can keep in mind for things like where you're doing these revisions and so forth.
Yeah, so you could have a 100% virtual committee meeting, just the way I understand it, your next meeting couldn't be that way.
Yeah, so like if you were gonna have a in-person meeting in advance of the May meeting in the morning, you can, a week before or whatever makes sense, have a 100% virtual meeting to connect everybody if need be.
Or to do these revisions or whatever.
The second thing is that for those of you that live 60 miles from the site of meeting, we of course meet mostly in Martinsville. If you live 60 or more miles from Martinsville, you do not, you can meet virtually. You still don't count towards a quorum, but there are no announcements of absences. It's just accepted that you will be joining in virtually. You're like right on the edge, Lauren. Yeah, so are you, Nathan. The rest of you, I think, are good.
I just made it.
Jennifer, you're not 60 miles. If we meet in Martinsville, Jennifer, you can't participate. I'm not trying to goad you into breaking the law here or anything. Roberto, you're good.
It's a test.
So those are the two
Yep.
most important things. So we'll put that in official museum policy. We'll add that to our book.
Yep, so I think that's very helpful. We'll have to decide how to use it for the board, but for committee chairs, I think the committee chairs are empowered to use that how you would see fit. So, good news.
Mhm.
All right, I think we're done with art. So the next topic is the Education and Public Programs Committee report from Nathan.
Just piggybacking on what we were just discussing, the committee met, we were struggling to find out that we were gonna have an in-person quorum associated with these meetings. So Christy was just like, hey, why don't we do a fully remote one? So we did, we met a week ago on Thursday the 19th by Zoom. So now I wanna make sure we know we have to have the next one in person. Okay, so we did that. A couple of highlights, I'll try to be pretty quick. One thing that we always pay attention to is the numbers. Christy always updates us with a few different metrics, the number of programs and people served through outreach, through educational opportunities at the museum, and any sort of distance learning that's happening. And we're pleased to show that while the programs and the numbers served at the museum aren't quite back to the pre-pandemic levels, overall numbers of people served in programs are there or exceeding them. So we're not comparing ourselves to what we were doing in 2021. We're now back to comparing what we were doing in 2019 and years before. So really good news and movement there. A couple of other highlights, and I'll ask Christy to fill in any gaps here. But there is a new microscope lab in the museum. Started up in December. It was through an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant, working with Drs. Moncrief and Ivanoff. There's 15 student stereo microscopes in there. And I've already had some homeschool and private school groups come in and visit, and there will be a public school science coordinators meeting tour to show them what's there and how it works so that it's available to them going forward. And then one other thing, I think, Christy, the JMU Kid Win partnership, this is something we've done in the past. It sounds familiar.
We started with it pre-pandemic, and then of course pandemic hit, and so it got kind of put on pause.
Okay.
So this will be the first year that we actually implement it. So we had all of the legwork behind it pre-pandemic, and then just everything kind of shut down. So looking
So
forward to
I'm
that,
not, that's about as much as I know. Are we supporting a team that's going up there, or how are we related to it?
So the museum is actually the host site. And so it is it's a statewide competition through JMU's Center for Sustainable Energy. And so there's regional teams. And so we are the host site for the regional teams to compete. And so there's actual judging that will take place. The student teams design and construct their wind turbines. They have to figure all of this stuff out, and then they are going to test it with the wind tunnel that we house at the museum. And it can actually show the energy output of their wind turbine. And so that's part of the competition aspect, whose turbine can produce the most energy output. But so from our regional competition, the winners will then go on to the statewide competition at Virginia Beach.
Very exciting. Thank you, Christy. There are other things going on, obviously, so please, if you are interested, review the agenda and the minutes that's distributed with the board packet.
I'd like to actually bring up one thing that has been of interest of at least one board member and Christy as well, and that is a effort at the level of the Secretariat with the establishment of what are called Virginia Laboratory Schools. Yes. I'm still wrapping my hands around. I don't know if you've learned more, so please embellish what little I know. When I read about this online through the Secretary's office, it sounds to me like some kind of version of the governor's school, right? And so this is experiential, and they want kids getting into specific situations to not just get your normal academic learning in, but you're going to get practical hands-on work in the sciences. So I thought, wow, well, we already did that. We already do that, right? So we are connecting, I should say, have connected with New College Institute, our local higher ed center. There are grants that will help you set up those labs, but we got it, right? But the thing is, there's a lot of money, I'm talking multiple tens of millions of dollars available to facilitate programs. So in other words, to bring schools into your particular facility. And it's supposed to be run through institutes of higher learning, and we're kind of like that weird hybrid kind of thing. So we're still, again, trying to wrap our hands around this, but NCI definitely wants to partner. So their person in charge of that program is going to come visit the museum next week.
Nice.
So yeah. So that might be something that we'll be able to report on more firmly in May.
Is that something that is definitely going to happen, or something that's going to pass with this administration? Like the governor's schools have been around through multiple administrations. Is this something we think is going to stick, or we don't know?
I don't know. I just know there's a lot of money there right now, and the second thing is I don't really know what's going on with Governor's School, because do we still run one in Martinsville?
Yes.
It's the Piedmont Regional Governor's School. They have a campus in Danville and a campus in Martinsville.
Where's the one in Martinsville?
It's now at PNHCC.
Okay, all right.
It used to be at NCI.
Yeah, it used to be NCI, it used to be at the Jefferson Building, it used to be in a number of places. So we're still trying to figure this out.
And they're well funded too. I mean, these special programs, like they have all the technology they need, just lots of funding. So.
Joe, can you guys hear me? It's Dee. Yes. Lisa Stoneman is actually working on developing a lab school for the education department at Roanoke. And my understanding of the lab school is it's a way to get students that are underprivileged into areas that make sense. And so I don't claim to know more about it than that. But you're right, there's a whole lot of money. I think the grant that she's applying for Vermont College is like $500,000. And so she's already in this process. So you may want to pick her ear a little bit and find out what she knows, because she's been working with our dean and our president to develop this. So she's a good resource.
Awesome. I didn't know that. And when we meet with the NCI officer next week, I'll be traveling next week anyway, but then we'll kind of debrief and we'll reach out to Lisa. So that's awesome. Thank you.
When we met with Senator Stanley this morning, he specifically mentioned the partnership with NCI and the lab schools thing, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Okay.
Show me the money.
Anything else for Nathan or on the topic of education and public programs?
Just beware of programs that are STEM, because STEM does not include natural history. It just doesn't. Their STEM education programs are very weak and organizational. I know they do a lot of other great things, but it's not all that inclusive in the biological sciences. So just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Anything else? All right, I think next up is the facilities committee. Tom?
Yeah, we haven't met as a facilities committee, so I don't really have any updates since the last time we met. And I think there's a couple of sets of minutes in your packet. I know the ESCO project, I think we reported that was near completion, and I don't have any updates on that at this time, but I know that the solar panels were operating, and that's about all I had.
I have a question
Hi, Sherry.
for you. It's actually something Roberto, who can't talk, noticed as he was looking at the minutes. When you look at your minutes, a lot of times you've been meeting as a committee of one. Do you need committee members or active committee members so you're not meeting with yourself and staff? How can we help you with that?
Well, it was just the one meeting, I think, that
Okay.
we had that issue, and
Okay.
the two members that represent the board weren't there, but I did get a chance to meet with Ryan and Joe, and
Okay.
so
Just not anything we need to help you with.
I don't think so. And
Okay.
this opportunity to meet virtually might help with that too. So
Okay.
I think maybe we'll take advantage of that. Maybe we'll hold a facilities committee meeting that way between now and our next quarterly board meeting.
Yeah, I can give a brief update on the ESCO project.
Sure, that'd be great.
Please?
Yeah, well, the brief version is, what we reported last time was that we were at the tail end. We had maybe another 5 or 10% of work left to do, which had to do with ordering specific bits of equipment. And also, I didn't know it at the time, but I know now that the company refuses to actually replace the ballasts up in the Hall of Ancient Life because it's very tall and it looks like you have to be a bit of an acrobat to access, even though there are safety protocols, but I don't think there's anybody who's willing to get there. So we're looking for the right person. We have the lift that's appropriate and safe for it, but we have to get somebody who's who can navigate up there, I guess. I'm not gonna be the one to do it. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. The electric chargers have been an adventure. So these are the vehicle electric chargers. What happened was the state procured something like 11 or $15 million worth of chargers. And when Virginia Energy, who helped us out with the ESCO project, said, hey, you can get chargers from them free of charge. So we did procure those. Well, even though there are card swipers on them, there's some that Jonathan would have to be here to tell you, but there's some technical issue behind getting them used. So now we have to use a third party, and we're getting Siemens to do that. We're not paying for any of this, right? So this is all good. But the second thing is that the chargers that the state bought have whatever you call the thing that goes into the car, not the plug, but maybe it's a plug.
Well, it is the plug.
Is that what it's called? Okay. Well, it's some kind of archaic version of it. So it has to have and it's not just ours, it's everyone that the state owns. And so I can tell you from experience, it doesn't plug into a Chevy, it doesn't plug into a Tesla. We've tried it. So the state is now or we are now working on with Siemens to get the proper adapters that will be permanently affixed to the devices. And then the Virginia Energy is gonna take all the fixes that we figured out, and they're gonna apply it to all the other stuff.
No
So,
wonder the state gave them to you.
yeah, so I guess part of what I'm saying here,
Low
I guess what I'm also saying here, and I will bring up publicly, I think everything that Jonathan Martin and Tim King, you don't interact with Tim a lot, he's our head of buildings and grounds. They have gone through a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, a lot of pulling their hair out because there's all this frustration. So particularly with the EV chargers, but they really deserve a pat on the back for what they've done this past year.
Thank you, thank you.
But everything else seems to be going good. I think the HVAC works so much better. I mean, I think it's a much better building. It was not unusual back in the day that I would walk into an area of collections and I'd be like, why is it so humid back here?
Yeah.
You know, and that was terrible, you know?
That's not good for
And
the
no,
specimens either.
no. Even in exhibits,
Like
you would,
Douglas Avenue.
in some places, you would see
Right.
curling of the paper and so forth. So that doesn't seem to be an issue anymore.
Have we noticed a change in our bills yet?
Not on paper. Yes, we have noticed a change in the bills very recently, but don't forget during this whole time where every time we started adding more and more efficiency to the building, we had a whole crew over at Douglas Avenue pulling electricity over there for the install of Douglas Avenue roof.
They're the same bill.
Yes,
You can't tell the difference between the footprint of both buildings.
we,
You should get two separate, gotta be two separate meters.
yeah, there's two separate meters. I get a report that it shows the gross, so I haven't looked at it.
You can, it's two separate
Okay.
meters. I would ask for separate data so you can see if the ESCO project is, you wanna know if the ESCO project's making a difference, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had asked last time, and I think, you said you're still working on it, but something that can make available to the public, at the museum, something that shows how much energy you're getting from the EV chargers and the solar panels and all of that you're still working on that, I understand, right?
Yeah, we have access to a web link now that we can put on our website, share it on social media, and we can also display it. The long-term plan is that we do have an extra solar panel that is not gonna be installed. So we wanna make a lobby exhibit with showing the data, having the screen, and ultimately what I would like to see is this is what you can do. This is, as a visitor, here's your call to action if you want to solarize, say, your house or something like that.
Okay, I'll probably keep asking about that, sorry in advance.
Okay.
Anything else on facilities, ESCO?
I'll just say, I didn't mean to turn anybody away if you do want to participate on the facilities committee, so please express interest if you want to join us.
I will try to join you. I find it really interesting, so. All right, so, thank you. I think we now have a quorum. Yay! So I think, do you want to just confirm we have a quorum? Because if so, we might want to go back and vote on those items we didn't vote on.
Yes, we do have a quorum present,
Take attendance.
and,
Do we take attendance formally?
as a roll call?
Yes, like as attendance, because we never did. Sorry, continue on.
Okay, all
Probably
right.
need to.
What we need to do first is to address our online participants. So Jennifer and Roberto is more than 60 miles from here, so he does not have to give an excuse. Jennifer, you're more than 60 miles from Richmond, and Melanie's more than 60 miles, so we don't have to give excuses for absences. But however, excuse me, with that resolved, the board has to vote by roll call to invite them to join the meeting and then to invite them via roll call to give them permission to vote remotely.
Two separate votes.
Two separate roll call votes.
Okay, so I move that we admit the folks participating virtually. And I can't ask that they be able to vote. That's going to be a second call. So I just ask that they be admitted.
Yes.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, no, roll
That's
call,
just a
roll call.
vote.
Who's going to do the roll
I
call?
got it.
All right.
Tom?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Art,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
Nathan votes yes, and it passed.
All right, I move that, our board members who are virtual not only be admitted, thank you for that prior vote, but they also be able to participate in the meeting and vote.
Second.
Okay, Tom,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Art,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
and Nathan votes yes, it passes.
Yay. Okay. Do we have to do anything else, or we can go back to those items?
Go back to those items.
Okay, we have 3 items we passed by that needed a quorum for us to be able to vote. The first are the minutes from our prior meeting. Those were sent out to you as part of the package. They're dated September, November 12th. So I have one, but does anybody have any edits to the minutes from our Saturday, November 12th meeting? Okay, I have an edit.
I do not.
Okay, there is a line that says Virginia Museum of this is on page 5. This is the Virginia Museum of Natural History is made up of 2 organizations, the Virginia Museum of Natural History Board and the State of Virginia. I don't think we're made up of the State of Virginia, so I think that's just some awkward language that I think we should probably fix. I think when I mentioned this to you, Joe, you had a suggestion for how we could change it?
That the Virginia Museum of Natural History includes us as a state agency partnering with the VMNH Foundation Board.
Okay. Anybody else have any adjustments to the minutes? Okay, with that adjustment, do we have a motion to approve the
moved.
minutes?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Who made the original motion, please?
I did.
Tom? As edited, as amended.
The muffled second was mine.
I got it, all right, thank you.
Okay. We have a resolution honoring Gene Smith, who, for those of you who knew him, was just a wonderful man. Joe, you want to tell your story about the General Assembly and Gene last year?
Sure. What I always admired about the guy, I told his wife that we would go for our General Assembly extravaganza, and it's all high speed and everything. We could walk around the corner, he could bump into a delegate or an aide or a staffer, and he had the ability to ask them about their grandchildren by name, right? And so he was the guy that developed all these relationships, and I think he did a really good job. I am sorry to say, I think the last General Assembly session that he joined us prior to COVID, we actually lost him in the stairwell, and I didn't see him until the next meeting. So, but he did manage to escape the General Assembly session and rejoin society. So, and we miss him a lot.
When I joined the board in 2016, he was assigned as my mentor, handler,
Yeah.
senior board member.
That's a good idea.
He
We
was
should do that.
somebody that I could communicate with, and I didn't officially, but I did spend time talking with him and just getting a feel, his take on things and what he felt was important and not, and I found that really valuable.
Do you think we should create
That's a
board
really neat idea.
mentors for new people?
A really good
members?
idea.
I like that idea. You didn't use it, but I like the idea.
Just be careful who you get.
Okay.
You could get a slanted view of things.
All right, with that, I'm gonna read the resolution for Gene. Listen closely, because we're gonna vote. Whereas Mr. R. Gene Smith was appointed to the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Natural History in July 2012 and served until June 2017. Whereas Mr. Smith served the VMNH Foundation Board of Directors since 2017. Whereas Mr. Smith served on the museum's Waynesboro Advocacy Committee, providing valuable guidance in the museum's quest to establish its first permanent branch campus. Whereas Mr. Smith's knowledge of the Virginia General Assembly was an asset that helped the Board of Trustees advocate for museum support. Whereas Mr. Smith connected the museum's interest in the Leatherwood estate of Patrick Henry to the resources and knowledge of Patrick Henry's Red Hill. whereas Mr. Smith's passion for history and the natural world is evident in his support of the museum staff. Therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Natural History hereby note with great sadness the loss of Mr. R. Gene Smith, whose valued contributions during his service as trustee and a foundation director of the Virginia Museum of Natural History will be sorely missed. And be it resolved further that the Secretary of the Board of Trustees prepare a copy of this resolution for presentation to the family of Mr. R. Gene Smith as an expression of the Virginia Museum of Natural History's respect for his memory. Done this 26th day of January 2023 in Richmond, Virginia by unanimous vote of the Board of Trustees of the Virginia Museum of Natural History. That's very nice.
Very nice.
Very nice. Is this a regular vote?
Yes.
Would somebody like to move that we approve the resolution for Gene Smith?
I so move.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So I'm happy to sign this after the meeting or whenever you think it's appropriate to sign it. Okay, thank you for that, everybody. We'll miss Jean. The last item that we needed to go back to was the treasurer's report. Cord is not here, so who is giving the treasurer's report?
We're gonna split it. Ryan and I will split it, so he'll get it started.
Okay, so on your financial information here, I just want to highlight a few points that Jonathan graciously highlighted for me. So item number 1 under total support, you'll see that the appropriation is higher mid-year than it was at the beginning, and that's for the additional funds added for 5% raises for staff as approved by the state, along with $1,000 bonuses that were received December 1st. So you'll see that is reflected in the overall support. Item 2, as far as admissions revenue, that has come online. We've talked about that already. It's very strong, rebounding, and in fact, it's slightly higher than what's represented here. We've got additional funds that come in through Groupon and other sources that don't show up immediately on the report. So we're gonna, like Joe mentioned, hopefully continue that curve and in a couple of years be where we were or past where we were pre-pandemic. Number 3, Christie has secured support, 100% of support from the city and the county for education programming. So the city of Martinsville and Henry County have traditionally provided funding support for education, which is partly funding for salaries, but also programming as well. As far as number 4, grant revenue, it is strong so far this year. So it's along with general grants, that is research grants, education. So it's restricted gifts across the board, all supporting mission-based programs. So we all work together on those. It's multiple people involved with each grant. So that's going strong. And it should be even higher next quarter. We've got several in process. It's just a matter of timing when we get the funding. Number 6, skipping down to number 6, we have received $79,000 so far in pass-through funds for ESCO. So that's from the Virginia Department of Energy. So there will be additional funds coming for that. That's the first installment. Number 9, as far as expenses, we talked about utilities, slightly over where we were, but hopefully we can look at separating the Douglas and Sterling as well. So I think overall the message is revenue is strong. It's probably higher than what we expected at this point, but it's due to all the work of the staff and the boards and the foundation and everybody's work. So we're looking forward to continuing these trends. Happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Joe.
Questions?
Motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Well, actually, the treasurer's report also, and I'll be very brief on this, it includes the capital projects report. So just, we are going to have a Winsboro Advocacy Committee report, so I really am not going to touch on that at this point. Sorry.
That's a separate document, Joe? Or
What's that?
the capital appropriation?
Yeah.
It's a separate attachment in your,
4B.
yeah.
Okay.
And I guess, I'm sorry, I guess we already kind of talked about these things. I forget what was mentioned. I just want to make sure it's clear. The Gene S. Adams Education Fulfillment, I think Lisa mentioned in the chair's report, we should have bids on that in February. The good thing is we already have more companies interested in it than we did last time, and we think that was part of the problem. I think we only had 6 companies bid on it. So we hope to have good news this spring. So actually, I'm good. I'm just going to leave it at that. If you want to vote to accept.
I did caution Joe that it's entirely possible, even if we have multiple bidders this time, the prices still may be higher. I mean, we're just in an environment where prices for that kind of thing are much higher, so hopefully we'll be fine, but we'll see. Anybody have any further questions about the treasurer's report or the capital projects report? Okay, so did you want to make your motion?
Yeah, motion to accept the treasurer's report and the capital projects report.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the treasurer's report and the capital projects report is approved. Joe, can you just confirm for me that Roberto is officially part of the meeting and can speak? Because I have an email from him.
Yeah, Roberto, you're good. You can. We have a quorum present, so you can participate electronically to give the strategic planning committee report if that's where you're at.
No, but before we get to that, Roberto, you'd sent me a text about needing to draft, vote, and accept on a policy. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, the way I read the new FOIA things, and there's language in there that we need to copy and accept, because basically the policy lets agencies do things, but the agencies can individually, or the commissions can individually accept less of their membership, so to speak. So the way I read it, we literally have to make it a policy of our board to allow what is allowed via the FOIA statute.
This
That's
is
the way I read it.
This is a FOIA thing, or this is about the virtual meeting thing? Is this a separate topic?
both.
It's both. It's all one policy.
Yeah,
It's all one. Yeah, it's all one.
The electronic meetings under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act is what we need to incorporate into the draft electronic policy document that I drafted last year. So
Okay, so I had asked if we needed a vote, and you said you didn't think so, but I think Roberto thinks we do. So
Why do we need a vote to accept state policy when the Richmond's telling us what we need to do? What is there to vote on?
It's in the policy. I'm just saying what's in the policy, and we literally cut and paste it and vote on it. So that's
We
what
have to accept the
says.
policy that they imposed on us,
That they
I guess.
impose that we have to follow whether we like it or not? We vote whether we do that or not? Or we'll vote on anything, won't we?
Welcome to government.
do we need to, so 2 options. Do we need to ask the lawyer and bring this up in May? I'm afraid that would preclude us from having virtual meetings between now and May. So that's one option, is to talk to the lawyer and figure out whether they have to vote. If we don't, then we can have meetings between now and May that are virtual. Or can we vote to accept the state's policy
that's what I was
without having to see the specific policy document?
based upon Roberto's comments. That's what's going to be my recommendation.
We
because
vote to accept.
the Freedom of Information Act policies put forth by the state of Virginia.
Can you give me the thing so I can refer to it as by name or by document?
I'm lost now. Are we still asking whether we're voting on state policy that governs our actions?
Yes, we are.
Joe, if that's the case, then do we need to go back and give reasons for not attending, since the 60-mile thing wouldn't apply?
And did we actually have a meeting last Thursday? I mean, I was there, but did we actually have a meeting?
Okay, why don't we vote to approve this policy? We can ask the lawyer about our prior meetings and whether they were.
I mean, we didn't take any action. I guess it doesn't really matter, but it's just a little semantic.
Yeah,
But
and
I think we need to go back for the virtual people, though, just to make sure we haven't attended a meeting without, you see what I'm saying?
I think before we do anything, we need to get guidance from council as to how to move forward. And if it requires doing something differently or not. We just stick with the current policy we've been working under.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but that means we've got to go back for the virtual people and use the policy that we'd had before. So the 60 miles would not apply.
And have no virtual meetings between now and May. So if your committee wanted to meet or any committee wanted to meet virtually, they could not. So I would prefer that we vote to accept the state's policy in case that's sufficient. And if it's not sufficient, then we'll have to do whatever the lawyer recommends.
The old provisional vote.
All right,
Yeah.
so what I, just to kind of wrap it all up, I would suggest we, number one, follow Jennifer's suggestion, go to the 3 online participants and just make sure that we've got that covered and ask for their reasons for absence. I would vote on agreeing to follow state policy, and I will then find out if I have to update this with that, and you have to actually have a full board vote on it.
Correct.
And if we don't, and this just becomes, as I was hoping it was gonna be, an internal document in our policy manual,
Then we're good.
then you're good.
Okay, so can the 3 folks that are participating remotely please give us your reason for participating remotely? Their choices are personal or work, right?
Or illness.
Or illness.
Mhm. So,
Okay, Jennifer, I think we know yours, but you
Yeah. Mine is illness. I tested positive for flu B, so I'm not sharing my germs with everybody.
Thank you. Luck. I appreciate that.
Yep. The other 2 folks?
Roberto and Melanie.
This is Melanie. I am working in Greensboro.
Yep. Roberto?
I am in Florida for family reasons,
Very
way
good.
beyond 60 miles.
Okay, thank you guys. All right. In case we need it, I move that we vote to abide by the state's new policy for FOIA and electronic meetings. We need a second.
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Abstain?
I'll abstain as well.
Okay. I think the motion carries. Hopefully we have taken care of that. All right, anything else on that? All right, I think the next item is the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee. Tom.
Yeah, so we've been meeting monthly. It's a very active committee. As you know, we're in detailed design, so we've been learning from the architects, and also following along some of the studies that have been done on the lot there. Ground penetrating radar study and some excavations to see we're not building on top of a burial mound or something like that. So we also want to express our sadness at the loss of Gene Smith, because he was a valuable member of our committee, and we'll be approaching the foundation for somebody to join us representing the 2 seats that sit on our committee from the foundation. In Waynesboro, we've had a lot of active community engagement. We continue to offer the science talks, and we update the community on the status of the campus through that. Those are monthly. In November, we held one on landslides that was well attended. January, we had an even more well attended talk on American eels. And in February, we're looking forward to talk from a microbiologist about the microbiology of watersheds. In March, about harmful algal blooms, and in April, about brook trout. And all of these talks, thanks to Zach and the museum, are also archived, so you can watch them, and they're on playlists that the museum has shared, and we're going to share through our network for teachers, for example, that may be interested in talking about something in their classroom. I've also been hosting public meetings at the library on third Fridays, just to share with the community the opportunity to ask questions, and also to share the information that we have regarding the status of the design. Those have been well attended, and I've been capturing lots of comments and feedback, sharing those with museum staff and also the team of architects. Probably the 2 most common questions are, how are we impacting parking? Because we're building on top of a parking lot, so a lot of people are concerned about the loss of parking. So try to address that.
What's the answer?
Well, we do lose about 120 spots, yet also adjacent to us, they're building or designing the South River Preserve, and there's 77 spots there that will be new and very close to our facility and to the park. So I think there are some offsets. You know, if you talk to the city managers, they say there's plenty of parking in town and it shouldn't be an issue. But, you know, anybody who wants to park on that particular lot won't be able to because there'll be a building there. And I'm trying to design some maps showing that, the layout of the building, the parking that would be taken away, and then also the parking that has been proposed to be added very nearby. And so I'm hoping to diffuse that question a little bit in the future at these public meetings. The other big question that I get is about flooding. Since we are on the banks of the river, a lot of people know that it floods and have seen historically some large floods. We do know that the building footprint is outside the floodplain on an upper part of the parking lot, and we're also going to see from the engineering part of the design team a revisit of that floodplain designation. So once again, I hope to share maps clearly designating, showing that the building will be outside the floodplain. I had an interesting anecdotal story that somebody told me, which was in one of the historic floods, I think it was 96, a local car dealer actually parked all of his cars on that lot because he knew that they would not flood. So that's a good story to tell.
Besides local car dealers trying to avoid flooded cars, who uses that lot now? Is it patrons of local businesses? Is it employees of local businesses, or a mix?
All of the above, and it's especially used when we have festivals in town.
Dog
So we have
walkers.
some fall foliage festivals. We have, you know, the River Fest. We have a number of festivals where we bring thousands of people to town, and that lot gets used extensively.
So when it's not event time, what percentage on average?
I've been there a lot where it's pretty much vacant.
Okay.
You know, and so my experience is that we're not going to have a problem with that, but you know, we continue to hear from
So people, if they notice it at all, they'll notice it during special events as opposed to daily.
The other community that has expressed concern is the people that host the farmers market very close by in the pavilion. And they say, you know, the farmers market serves a part of the community that wouldn't otherwise have fresh produce. So we're really concerned about them being able to access our farmers market. And so I recognize that. I think that's something we need to think about as we design the museum. We talk about ourselves being a museum without walls, and I think there could be an opportunity to actually have exhibits that talk about the value of, you know, local produce and maybe even some history of how crops have been grown in the valley, even back to, you know, the indigenous people who lived there.
Though
So,
I will have to say, those people who talk about serving part of the community that doesn't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, those same people generally do not have access to a car. So a parking lot is not a big consideration for them. They generally, because if you got a car,
Yeah.
you can drive to the Publix.
that's an interesting point. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
So that's,
Right.
from my work, I can tell you that it's the lack of transportation to places, public transportation to places that you can purchase fresh fruit and vegetables is an issue.
Thank you, Ann. I will use that in my response in the future. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
A car gets you a lot of things.
right.
Is there alternative event parking somewhere else in town?
You know, there's a huge lot at the Kroger. There are some municipal lots. There's even a proposal to take down one of the old buildings, a storefront that is sitting vacant for quite a while, and replace that with a residential building that will have parking, and some of it would be accessible to the public. I think a lot of people see, you know, Charlottesville is right across the mountain from us, and some people say, well, it's so difficult to go shopping in Charlottesville because I can't find a place to park.
Yeah.
And we don't want to become Charlottesville is what they say.
Which is true.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I certainly see the value to local business people who say, yeah, my customer can park right in front of my store and walk in and grab something quickly.
Right.
So I get it. And we're doing our best to respond. So those are a couple things that we've been doing to engage the community. I want to express my thanks to those that visited the Legislative Assembly this morning. You know, I was with Christy and with Jonathan. We had nice talks with a number of legislators. As you have already learned in Joe's report, we are not in the governor's proposed budget for the capital outlay for the construction. However, Senator Hanger has put in a member request in the capital outlay budget for construction. And he is on the finance committee. And we are hoping that his position and it will work through the committee and then go to conference, and the House will also accept that. So it is an amendment or a request that would add us as a line there. It's called a language only, but it gives us at least the possibility to be funded in the coming fiscal year.
So what are the timelines that surround those actions? When should we expect that we would know something?
So I talked to his legislative aide this morning. We talked to his legislative aide this morning, and she said that what will happen is we will next know something on Sunday, February 5th, which is when they come out of conference and they have their budget bill.
Right.
So we want to look at that and see whether that line made it through.
Great.
Yeah.
What
And
was
then it's
that date?
Sunday, February 5th.
Next week?
Like 2.
Yeah, and unlike it, and I've been trying to educate myself on this, but I know that bills have to be both in the House and in the Senate, and then when they go to conference, they resolve them.
Right.
Well, with us, it's a budget bill. So there's a budget bill coming from the House and there's a budget bill coming from the Senate. So we don't need it from both sides.
Right.
And what he's just simply done is amended the Senate side, or requested to amend the Senate side. But if that goes through, that would be resolved in conference and could be included in the budget going forward from both houses. So
it's a separate lobbying effort to go
Yeah,
after
you would
that
hope he
conference.
would be on the conference committee.
Yeah,
because
well,
it's not-
we don't know, and that's a question I asked today, actually. Will we know this on the conference committee? And the legislative aide said, no, we don't share that until after the fact. But you can look at previous years, and it's quite common that the same people show up on the conference committee, so.
And has
That's
he
kind of what
typically
we got.
been on the conference committee?
Hanger has been on the conference committee in the past. And actually, we looked at the subcommittee that has been, you know, considering, this is
Be the more senior legislators.
he
for sure.
is. The capital outlay subcommittee, and it's Cree Deeds, who's chair, who we visited with today. Tommy Norman, who's vice chair, who we also visited with today. Janet Howell, who we visited with today. Dick Saslaw, Emmett Hanger, and the only one we didn't visit with was Mamie Locke. So we hit 5 of the 6.
Good.
So, anyway,
Good.
that's what I have as a
Good
report.
targeting.
Anybody have any further questions on the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee report?
Do you know how much he's trying to include in his amendment?
So it's a language only, which means that he would accept the cost estimate that will come out of the detailed design. And we just got that. It's being reviewed right now. In fact, Joe and staff are going to meet with the architectural group and have a few questions, but we will have a cost estimate that we can share then with Hanger. And because we're in there as language only, as long as it's within a bracket amount, you know, that helps. And of course, Jonathan's been working closely with Department of Planning and Budget and DGS.
Any further questions on Waynesboro? Thank you for having those sessions with the public. I imagine those are making a big difference. All right, Roberto, you're now official, so I think you can give your strategic planning committee report.
Well, thank you. I guess the short answer is that we had kind of an intense meeting. Mark and I were there with staff in Richmond, and we delved into all sorts of topics as you saw outlined in our meeting minutes. I think we had two levels of discussion really in terms of longer range thoughts and actually very shorter range thoughts, which were somewhat summarized in the last page of our minutes in terms of suggestions for the board. And things to think about in the longer term. The things in the longer term is obviously following the old adage of what gets measured gets managed, is thinking about in our strategic process as we go forward, how do we want to measure things? How do we want to measure them? How do we want to relate them to the overall mission of the organization? How do we want to define success, both in the short term and the long term? And quite honestly, how that may align with our ongoing relationship with the foundation, and strategically working between ourselves and the foundation to deliver what staff and the museum need to fulfill its mission. Obviously, accreditation is going to be a big item in the medium term. So we'll be looking at that and how the process can help fulfill the accreditation needs, and the longer term reputation of the organization as a whole, because obviously accreditation is a big part of that. In the short term, there were just a couple of items in today's sessions actually echo the potential strategic use of the annual report that we are required by statute to deliver every year. That's something that could help outline our needs and our direction, and also creates a leave behind that could be used not only in today's exercises, but also back home with our legislators and their legislative staff to provide a stake in the ground, so to speak, on what we're about and what we're trying to do. So the committee's suggestion to the board, and we can have further discussions later on, is how we use this annual report, what needs to be in it, and how do we cater the language to help fulfill and outline what it is we're looking to do. The other two items of short-term nature were in terms of looking forward and planning in the short term. We had talked previously about creating a stakeholder list, and the strategic part of that is realizing who may have what kind of connections with their legislators and other key stakeholders in Waynesboro, Martinsville, et cetera. So having a well-defined list of contacts, and then the overarching goal of how we look at DEIA throughout the organization and the things we do. We were open to getting questions from the rest of the board, either as a group or individually, on if there were any areas that in the meantime we should get some background materials or other information, so that we start developing a key language and baseline that we can all work from in terms of discussing DIA topics. That's kind of like the big overview. I'm open to any questions from the notes, of any questions from what I just outlined in terms of things that we may want to talk about in committee at our next meeting.
I'd like to add one thing, and I appreciate it, Roberta, bringing it up, and it has to do with the annual report and how that can actually evolve into an effective leave behind for the General Assembly. I completely agree. And Mark gave us a really cool idea for a template, and we are messing around with it, Mark. Okay, yeah. So really what it does is it attempts to line up our strategic plan, our budget, and therefore the investment in the various goals of the strategic plan, and then with the Code of Virginia and the 6 purposes why we exist. And I'd like to say that this is exactly how I was thinking when we had our consultant in and we developed Museum Without Walls 2020 to 2025, but I didn't. But it still worked out that actually the alignment is really good. In other words, every single one of our goals speaks to the 6 purposes as to why the museum exists. So we're still messing around with it. There's he had the idea of having direct and indirect costs separated out. Jonathan and I played with the numbers, looking at it from the total spending of the 5 years, so past spending during the first few years of this 5-year period, then the anticipated spending up through 2025. So we're still trying to figure out what the best presentation is, but it's
yeah, I think it's a nice shot that you guys took at this. I think one of the other things that I brought up in this discussion was, as we're trying to match up these goals with the charter, is it gives us a chance to keep going back and say, does that charter still make sense given all the, environmental factors and things that are going on in our business as an agency and within your work and how things work in the educational side and every aspect within the research and collections, and where is that money being spent? And is there something we need to think about in terms of tweaking the charter if we think that's necessary? Is it old and out of date, or is it really perfect still? And I think the other thing was looking at what the percentages of what we were spending our time on versus that charter. How much of it is going towards RSC versus other aspects?
When you refer to the charter, you're talking about what's currently in the state code?
Yes.
Okay. It's well beyond I think that that's something we want to get into to lobby
Right, I'm
the
not saying,
legislature.
I'm not saying telling them what to do, but I just want to make sure that it's still relevant, right?
Well, but I'm saying
Yeah.
if it isn't,
Yeah.
that's the way to ultimately approach it in the long run. Pardon me. The other thing is, a lot of these topics were discussed at the workshop that we had last summer. Was that document and those notes folded into this discussion, or will it be? I mean, I was zipping through these topics, and a lot of these things were discussed by all of us in bits and pieces. That should be folded into this discussion too, not just a separate document that's being created by a discussion of just a single committee.
No, I don't think it's driving any new way of looking at it.
No, I'm not suggesting that. It's just a lot of this has already been discussed by a broader group. That should be folded into this ultimate discussion.
That makes sense.
Okay.
I think the document that you're referring to is meant to come to us to review at some point anyway, right? You're not planning to put anything out or do anything without us all reviewing it. Yeah.
And it's one piece of that larger
It's
discussion.
one way of looking at something that was.
Right.
Well, my point wasn't that we're, okay.
No, I'd be interested in understanding.
Otherwise, we'll take a vote on it.
Okay.
Okay, anybody have any, I have one, but anybody besides me have any questions for the strategic planning committee? So one of the things that you guys talked about, which I found really interesting, was the idea of having internships for students of diverse backgrounds. And I like that idea. I just wanted to let the board and the strategic planning committee know that Dominion has put in place a program specifically for diverse interns. And I don't know if this is the maybe third or fourth year we've had it, including a diversity hiring conference. And it has helped us dramatically increase our diverse hires, because we bring people in and they see us and, and they're like, oh, Dominion's a good place to work. And then some of them end up staying. So I think it's a great way to get people in the pipeline. So I like the idea of the museum supporting a diverse internship program if we have the funding. I think it's really worthwhile and can help us with our diversity hiring in general. So my 2 cents on one of your ideas from the committee. Anything else for the strategic planning committee? All right, well, I look forward to seeing the rest of the documents that you guys are working on and your thoughts on how we can move forward strategically. All right, I think that was the last official thing on the agenda. We have gone back and voted on everything we needed to vote on. So are there any announcements or any items that aren't on the agenda that anyone would like to bring up and discuss?
Lisa, if it's okay, I'd like to discuss the situation with CHML.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to be asking for the board's help. Staff will do the legwork, but I'll just be blunt. There are various ways, without getting into details that I shouldn't be discussing publicly, there are various ways that the public can keep their eye on the state government and how it works. So there are things like FOIA requests. There's a hotline for waste, abuse, and fraud, and so forth. And there are probably other things that I'm just not thinking of offhand. We've already had the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab, as I call it, pinged from the outside twice. And I have good reason to suspect that part of the involvement could be that there are colleagues or whoever who maybe have deep interest in the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab and its success, but are not necessarily involved. So it's kind of I'll be blunt, it's a jealousy thing, right? So we have reason to believe that that's at least part of it and whatnot. So we've been working out everything, but I've been spending more time than I thought working, trying to be the buffer to CHML, and I think the board can help with that. So let me start. We've already heard from Ryan about the upgrades to our wireless network. A lot of what the scientists use in terms of software and hardware is VITA incompliant, so they can't use it. So what they do is they tap the wireless, so that's what is leading to the upgrades. And I think Ryan specifically mentioned that there will be a router that will be password protected and for the CHML only, right? So we'll have a public thing, a staff thing, and then a separate CHML thing. So that's step one. Number two, working with the staff, they have the contacts with outside agencies that would have the capacity to do a cybersecurity analysis for us. So we're going to look into see what that entails, budget, timeline, the whole thing. So that's going to be a step we'll be taking here shortly. And then the last thing is I went through museum policy. I think the board, with our help, so in other words, staff could come up with some proposed wording. I think because CHML is so different than what the museum envisioned in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, when most of the policy was written, that we should have a specific Board of Trustees approved policy for the CHML. And so where I'm going with this in general, and this doesn't have to cover everything, there could be more added to this as well, but there's some language that I think is beneficial. So before I get into that, I will just remind everyone, 3 of our CHML staff are reservists, 2 in the Army Reserves and 1 in the Naval Reserve, right? And that, remember, their work in the reserves and the military, that's the old monuments men concept, right? So they are invited to join the Army Reserves or Naval Reserves because of their particular backgrounds as archaeologists to do this cultural preservation. The second thing is that the work that they're doing while they're doing cultural preservation, as you will see, falls right in line with museum policy and mission. However, it doesn't say anywhere, even though we as a state agency, of course, we take it for granted. Someone wants to join the reserves, you're welcome to do it. You get 17 extra days of leave to support your reserve work, or whatever the numbers are. So, but I think we do need to spell it out. So if you bear with me, the Board of Trustees has the responsibility to formulate and maintain policies that govern the museum, and we have a thick book on that. The director is responsible for carrying out those established policies. I have to supervise the staff. I'm paraphrasing here. But specifically it says that he also creates conditions which enable staff members to perform to the full extent of their abilities, at the same time assuring them freedom from unreasonable demands. And that's what's been happening. We're spending a lot of time on these outside people poking around the edges, seeing if they can interfere with what they're doing, right? I will also note that right in the policy, word for word, it says the museum must strive to preserve and guard the natural and cultural heritage of the world, right? So that's right there. So I went through a logic exercise, and so I would like to draft and share with the museum's Board of Trustees policy language that will say something to the effect that the mission of CHML is approved by the Board of Trustees, that they understand that the Army Reserve relationship is directly responsible for our ability to achieve mission, because these are Army Reservists in the Signal Corps, which have the specific mission of cultural heritage protection. Their direct relationship with the government comes through the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative. And its mission is to protect cultural heritage threatened or impacted by disasters and to help the U.S. and international communities preserve their identities and history. I'm going to put in the policy that VMNH Board of Trustees acknowledges that that mission parallels our mission, and it does. It also, I think, should go in there that the trustees support the collaboration to meet the CHML and therefore the museum mission. These collaborations could include Virginia Department of Historic Resources, U.S. Department of Defense, Smithsonian Cultural Resource Rescue Initiative, and commercial entities that provide technological and technical assistance. The VMNH Board of Trustees supports voluntary enlistment And then lastly, the VMNH Board of Trustees recognizes the inherent value of the military commitment of the CHML staff to their work as members in the U.S. Army Civil Affairs Corps. These modern-day monuments men will have the responsibility to advise the military about cultural heritage issues, legal obligations, and diplomatic concerns that a unit could encounter in deployments throughout the world. It further recognized the value of CHML staff training U.S. personnel as well as authorized personnel of other governments and techniques of cultural heritage protection and preservation. I think we need to dive into the specifics to give CHML some cover, so that way if anyone attempts to interfere, it's in black and white that the Board of Trustees, appointed by the Governor of Virginia, supports the work that they're doing and the direct involvement with the U.S. Army Reserves.
And
I'm sorry to be so long. But
it's okay. One suggestion, I believe you said, cultural heritage sites impacted by disaster. You may want to add war and disaster, just to be perfectly clear, because some people could say war's a good thing. It's not a disaster.
we can do that and I will include it in our own writings here, and I think we already do when we talk about the CHML. We do mention armed conflict and natural disaster.
Armed conflict, either way you want, armed conflict is better than war. But the reason why I mention that is because then it somewhat ties in with being a reservist, because somebody will say, well, we don't send in the Army Reserve necessarily if there's a flood.
Right.
Right.
That's good. That's very helpful.
I agree with that. Incidentally, the language that I read there, that's the Smithsonian's Cultural Rescue Initiative mission. So we'll include that elsewhere. And like I said, I'm pretty sure it already is. You will see
armed conflict. I like that better.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm not sure how much of you guys were reading between the lines, but this is definitely needed.
Silly season.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I know in one case it was we were able to trace the, I'll call it interference, if you want to call it that, directly to an individual person based upon the evidence in front of us. You know, and it's unfortunate, but there are other. I also want to look ahead. I know, you know, I talked with Mark about this. You know, we do as a museum now. We do things that other governments don't like. So we need to look ahead towards that, as well as things like pettiness and I don't know.
Silliness. It's just plain silliness.
I understand.
Hopefully it's silliness and not a foreign actor.
That too. Could be.
So, does anybody have any concerns about Joe moving forward with developing policy that more formally includes the cultural heritage work into our mission? We all agree it's a good thing, but does anybody, we just need to formalize it, I think. Any concerns? Because Joe's gonna draft the policy, just send the policy out, and then we will be asked to vote on it at our next meeting in May.
The only thing about using like armed conflict, like that, depending on who's interpreting it, it could exclude like acts of terrorism or, you know, things that like, you don't want to have 4 pages of like everything that it applies to, but I don't know if you say disasters naturally and man-made. I don't know how you go about it.
You want to be broad though.
Yeah.
That's why armed conflict and disasters as opposed to natural disasters.
And I think we can get not only input from our own people, but the people that they report to in the Signal Corps. I think can help with that.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, any other announcements or additional action items for the board? All right, well, thank you again to everybody who traveled.
a meeting schedule? Our next meeting is scheduled for May
20th.
Joe, can you answer that question, the schedule for our next meeting?
I have it on my calendar. We will definitely share that.
It is Saturday, May 20th at 10 a.m.
All right, and then the next one after that.
Yeah, what about the other?
Can you bring up your August?
Moving forward.
The 19th.
It would be August 19th.
Okay.
That would be vacation
Is the
time.
May one gonna be a retreat?
That's up to the board, Jennifer, and the only reason I'm weasel wording that is that we specifically, when we started our strategic plan, 5-year plan, we said 2 years in, which was May of last year, that we would specifically have a retreat, but the board can call a retreat anytime that it likes.
And Lisa,
So I wasn't planning on it, but can plan on it.
I'll miss the next board meeting because I'll be very far away in Portugal.
Okay, that's
In May?
exciting. May.
Wow, okay.
Because yes, I do not have small children, so I can go with them. I want on vacation.
All right, if people would let me know, assuming that, we wanna take advantage of the virtual thing, if people would just let me, Joe, Maryzel, know your thoughts on virtual, et cetera, going forward, since we have that option. It might be good to take advantage of that option, assuming our voting today did whatever we needed to do. All right, anything else?
Move for adjournment?
Second, anybody? I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you guys for hanging online.
Thanks, Roberto, thanks, Jennifer, thanks, Stevie, thanks, Melanie.
I have to escort people out of the building as you leave, so if we could go some of us go into groups, just let me know when you're ready and we'll walk you out. Yeah.
Should I try to grab it?
That one.
It's just right
Yeah,
down in the corner.
there's not one in the lobby that I'm aware of. Don't rush, there'll be.
I know.